They always tell you that colleges have more similarities than differences.
But I kind of think that's cap, because the colleges are all so different, not just in how they look and where they are, but in terms of the support you get financially and in terms of welfare as well.
And whilst you may be happy regardless of where you go, there are some really key things to consider. You may end up regretting it if you haven't been able to make an informed decision. After all, it could cost you a significant amount just based on bursaries available from colleges. There are also substantial differences between colleges based on welfare resources available, as well as the whole academic vibe. My name's Maria, I'm a third year medical student studying at the University of Cambridge, and today I really want to go into how I would approach choosing a Cambridge college if I was to do it now. I want this to be a very honest video, and I want to highlight what are the main differences and things to consider in your application. Without any further ado, let's dive in. So first of all, what even is a Cambridge college? To put it simply, a Cambridge college is like a mini university within Cambridge. It's the place that you apply to initially. They handle your application and decide whether to invite you for an interview or send you to the application pool where other colleges can then consider you. You can kind of imagine it as your home away from home within the university. You eat and sleep there. They'll also provide a lot of college-specific entertainment, including events in Freshers Week as well as societies. Most of the people you'll meet will actually come from your college. So the college also has a supportive role. This can be financial or general from your tutor, as well as for your mental and physical health from the welfare officers or the college nurse. You can also have religious guidance from your college chaplain. Direct academic support is often college-based, but not necessarily. This will generally be done by your Director of Studies, known as your DOS. This is the main figure who oversees your academic progress and achievement. Although they typically reside within college, this isn't always the case. The supervisors that you have, which will give you weekly supervisions, also often reside in college, but for many people they don't. Although lectures and exams are university-wide, there can be significant differences between the workloads that are given by supervisors. Okay, so the first important point to consider is where can you even apply? So straight off the bat, there will be some colleges which you're not allowed to apply to just because of your sex or your age. So unless you're a mature student, so over 21, you can't apply to Wolfson, Hughes Hall or St Edmunds. Lucy Cavendish has recently changed their rules. If you are mature, you may want to consider applying to these, especially just because you might find it frustrating being surrounded by people who are 18. This isn't the case for everyone though. There were definitely a few people in my college who were over 21 but wanted to be in a non-mature environment. There are also a few female-only colleges that you need to watch out for. This is Newnham and Murray Edwards. Recently, Lucy Cavendish changed their regulations to allow men in. I think it's very important though to check the college entry requirements for the year you're applying, because there are constant changes taking place. So consideration number 2 is financial. And I really want to focus on this one, and I think a lot of you might be especially interested in this. So the Cambridge college you go to could end up costing you a lot more just depending on your choice. But how, I hear you cry? Well, let me explain. So of course the tuition fee will be the same regardless of where you go. It's £9,250 for a home student right now. There's also a bursary of up to £3,500 a year, which is also university-wide. The amount that people qualify for is dependent on their household income, so it will vary between different contexts. I've added some information in the description so you can find out how much you'd be eligible for. However, not all colleges have the same amount of money. In 2018, Clare Hall was the poorest with 32.7 million, whereas Trinity was the richest with £1.4 billion. There's this really nice diagram I found on the Guardian website which shows this very nicely and graphically. I think one of the main differences though is in the bursaries. So there are bursaries of up to £7,630 for completely free education. So there are huge discrepancies between how generous colleges are in their bursaries. If you're eligible for financial support, so for example if you had access to free school meals, this could make a very, very tangible difference. This really varies by college, and I really don't have the time or space to tell you about every single situation. But from what I know, St. John's College is the most generous in terms of this. So in 2016, they unveiled their pilot scheme, St. John's College Studentship Scheme. And this goes alongside the Cambridge bursary. This gives students non-repayable grants who meet their financial criteria. So if your household income is below £25,000 a year, you would qualify for £7,630 in addition to £3,500 just coming from the university. In October 2023, St. John's will fund the education, so the living costs and the tuition fees of their students from lower income backgrounds under their Free Places programme. This means you would have no student debt, and it would allow people who wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford to go to university. So now that I've got bursaries out of the way, there are some other key financial considerations, and that comes in the form of academic awards and scholarships, accommodation, and facilities. So wealthier colleges have much more dispensable income, so would be in a better position to give larger academic awards. You really need to check each college individually here though, because there are some big differences. The next thing is accommodation costs. So accommodation costs vary hugely even within a college. In my own college, the accommodation varied from around £3,400 to around £7,000 per year. And this depended on the size of the room, whether it was en suite, and the length of your contract. Some colleges have a lot more choice and cheaper options, so that's really worth considering. The next thing is facilities. Colleges have different facilities, be it swimming pools or gyms. For example, Christ's, Emmanuel, and Girton all have swimming pools. Choosing a college with better facilities may help you save some money if you were going to be spending it on privately owned ones instead. 3, this one is very close to my heart, but mental health resources within colleges vary wildly. I want to preface this though by saying that the university has some really great university-wide and student-led charities. For example, Student Minds Cambridge and Band Together. Despite this, there are some major differences between support available just based on the college you go to. So there's actually a really excellent article in the tab Cambridge which goes through this. So to cut a long story short, the differences between colleges in how much they spend on welfare and mental health support per student are staggering. So for 2020 to 2021, St. Catherine's College, my college, spent the most on this, which was £161.54. In contrast, at the very bottom, the lowest spending on mental health and welfare was Downing, which spent on average £6.40 per student. So let that sink in. That is a 25-fold difference between the most generous and least generous college. Other colleges, for example, Selwyn, only have an emergency fund as well. So that money is spent on a whole host of different things. It could be on actually having a proper mental health nurse within the college or a mental health team. It could also be on welfare talks that are given as well. So some colleges, including Queen's, which spent £121.47 per student, has an entire team which are dedicated to student welfare. At Queen's, this includes qualified therapists, a nurse registered in mental health, and pastoral figures. Okay, number 4, this is slightly controversial, but I think I really noticed this in my first year. Essentially, the academic environment and the workload actually really differs between colleges, far more than you'd actually expect. So different colleges have different environments, especially for certain subjects. Some colleges also rank differently on academic success. What do I mean by this? First of all, there's this ranking device called the Tompkins table, and that compares each of the colleges against each other. Essentially, this pits colleges against each other based on the academic achievement of their students, so the percentage of firsts in their cohort. Some colleges are renowned for doing really, really well year on year. So in particular, this includes Christ or Pembroke. In 2019, Christ had 44% of their students getting a first, whereas Homerton only had 18.6%. In all fairness, it's quite hard to read into this. Perhaps some colleges offer a better academic environment, or more incentives or pressure to do well. Conversely, some colleges, especially the older ones and the wealthier ones, may just have stronger applicants to begin with. Some colleges really like to pride themselves with success in a certain subject. So this seems to be the case for medicine at Gonville and Caius College. Historically, it's been linked to medicine. It was refounded from Gonville Hall to Gonville and Caius College based on a very generous donation by Dr. Caius, a medical doctor and alumnus in 1557. Today, it has the highest intake of medical students of any college, which is 24, which is a lot compared to the 6 to 15 you tend to have in the other Cambridge colleges. They also tend to have some of the best supervisors there. They tend to be lecturers on the course as well. Gonville and Caius does tend to set more work than the average college. So they do timed essays during their supervision, and they'd have a lot of essays during the year. I remember being told some kind of horror stories by some of my friends at Caius of them receiving upwards of 4, 5 or 6 essays per week, whereas in CATS I'd only tend to have 3 or 4. They changed their supervision groups based on how they ranked on their mock exams. Trinity has a similar reputation for maths. So since 2016, of the senior wranglers, so the people who rank first in their year, in third year, went to Trinity. That's also perhaps helped by their massive intake of math students, around 40 per year, and how they set additional, more tricky problem sheets to their students. Problem sheets are otherwise university-wide for maths. Ultimately, there is no right or wrong decision in choosing a college based on the academic vibe or environment. Going to a highly competitive college for your subject can be really, really inspiring and motivate you to do even better. It can also put you in contact with some really top professors who can explain things to a better degree. However, some of these very competitive environments may not work for you. Being pitted against your classmates to this extent or being set additional work doesn't really work for everyone. And this could ultimately affect your general enjoyment and experience in the university as a whole. I know some people who kind of regret their decision just based on this, so I just think it's important to be informed when you're applying. Number 5, this one's also slightly controversial, but I want to talk about it too. So some colleges emphasize certain things, and this may even happen in their application process. So some colleges may place a greater emphasis on certain skills over others within the same course. They might even have different preferences when sifting through applicants. It's key to note though that this is heavily dependent on the director of studies and may vary year on year. So I'm going to give you a personal example. So my college placed a really, really big emphasis on physics, and this was very apparent to me within the interview. So I recall having so many supervisions where I would be asked, are you a physicist or a biologist? So anybody who had done A-level physics would be labelled as a physicist, and if you hadn't, you would be a biologist. Anybody who has studied A-level physics would get a smile and be told, good choice, that is far more useful for medicine first year. Since I hadn't, I was definitely made to feel as though something was missing from my academic background. And there were definitely points where I felt like I'd made the wrong decision, and I almost panic started learning A-level physics just to help me get along. At the medicine open day for year 12s in CAPS, my college apparently made it quite clear that they had this preference for physics, but I had no idea about it. In fact, I had a friend who applied to St. Catherine's specifically because she hadn't done A-level biology, but she did A-level physics instead. After all, with physics, chemistry, maths, and further maths, she already had quite an atypical combination for applying to medicine. Alas, unfortunately for me, I never went to this medicine open day, so I had no idea. So learn from my mistakes and be sure to check out whether your college has a certain emphasis for a subject or for different parts of the course. So visit their open day, either in person or virtually if you can. Okay, number 6, location, location, location. This one is important, and I'm really glad I focused on this when I was applying. So there are a few factors to consider here, and I'm going to go through them all. So first of all, distance from the city centre. Number 2, more space and extra facilities. 3, accommodation. No, this may not be the college main site. 4, different choices of grocery shops. And 5, do you wake up to tourists? So find a map and figure out where the colleges actually are. Sure, some of them, especially the old ones, will be quite central, but then zoom a little further out and you might see a few colleges quite a bit further. Girton and Homerton, I'm looking at you. So Girton is technically not in Cambridge. It's actually in the village of Girton. It's approximately 4 kilometres from the city centre. I don't want to berate Girton for the distance it's from Cambridge. There's some really cool history to do with this, since Girton was actually the first women's college. Girton's also beautiful, but I really think the distance has to be something you consider. I think the best evidence though for them being so far from the city centre is the notorious cycling officer, which is part of their JCR, their college undergraduate committee. So when I was applying, location factored in somewhat, but it wasn't the whole story. However, I do think that the appeal of going to lectures and practicals would really decline just based on the distance. Also, another consideration is going out. After a night out, do you really want to be trekking back to a really far out college? Do you really think you'd be able to cycle, potentially drunk, or cough up the large amount it's going to be for a taxi ride home? The prices of Ubers also does add up. After a week, the Girton medics were all cycling or missing their lectures. The obviously cheaper and more eco-friendly option though is to get a bike. Extra space and facilities. Being at less central colleges though can have its perks. So Girton is very far out, but it has a massive indoor swimming pool, as well as some huge college grounds with their sports facilities on site. Homerton has their own orchard and apple juice production. Accommodation. Now, this is something I really want to focus on because I wasn't aware of this when I was applying, and I know a lot of people weren't and wish they were. So this is about accommodation. Accommodation is not always on main sites. Colleges further out tend to have better value accommodation, so they might have bigger rooms or lower prices, and their accommodation does tend to be together. That's not always the case though. So to put this into context, some of the smaller and more central colleges will actually have some of their accommodation off-site, and this may be a lot further than you were expecting. For St. Catherine's, we have the St. Chad's accommodation for the second years. This is quite a bit further out, maybe a 10-15 minute walk. It's very close to Selwyn College. It's really important to just be aware of where you may be shipped off to, just because accommodation isn't always going to be in the centre of your college for the entirety of your degree. There's also a different choice of grocery shops just based on the college you are. Another benefit of some of the hill colleges. so like St. Edmunds or Murray Edwards. These colleges are much closer to more budget-friendly supermarkets like Aldi. This is a great way to cut costs when you're just on a student budget. Last point to consider is tourists. If you have your heart set on King's, buckle up then because you're in for a ride. King's is notorious for tourists. It's central, it's grand, and it has a very nice chapel. It also even has its own visitor centre. In all fairness though, any large central college which looks beautiful will attract a fair amount of tourists, so be well aware. Number 7, the people. Oof. This is also slightly more controversial, but please hear me out. So wherever you choose, you will probably find friends. That being said though, your choice for college won't guarantee you making friends either. It really varies year on year, and you may just be really unlucky. What I want to focus your attention on though is the state school versus private school intake. So for the 2021 cohort, the state school intake actually had a disparity of 20 percentage points from the college with the highest state school intake to the one with the lowest. So yeah, please check out the link I have in the description because this has some really lovely graphs and some more info if you're interested. But yeah, unfortunately, there are some big differences in the split of privately educated and state educated students between colleges. So Gonville Keys, Robinson and St. John's were the worst offenders here. They only took in around 56% state school students. The colleges which had the highest intake of state educated students were Churchill and King's, which was around 77%. That's a massive difference. It's really nice to be informed about these when you're applying, but I don't really think it should be a deterrent that affects your decision too much. Also, I really don't think such stereotypes should continue to be perpetuated because we need to have more state school students getting into Oxbridge based on merit. People shouldn't be barred from going to a certain college because they think that it's far too posh for them to go to. Last point, number 8, sometimes size matters. Size of college, that is. So the size of colleges does vary a lot. So the smallest one based on intake is Peterhouse, which has around only 75 students per year. Put that against some of the biggest colleges like Trinity, which have upwards of 200. That's more than double. So small colleges tend to be close-knit and you are quite likely to be able to recognise everybody in college. It's quite nice having a whole bunch of friendly faces. It's also somewhat easier to get into committee positions or onto sports teams just because there's less competition. However, there's fewer people to meet in some of the small colleges and you may struggle finding the exact group of people you're going to click with. Another key thing to consider is some of the larger colleges also are somewhat wealthier, and that brings me back to point number 2. Okay, final note and conclusions. So I hope this video has been useful in helping you have a slightly more informed decision in choosing the right Cambridge college for you. Remember, it's also an option to have an open application, so that's where you don't specify which college you want to go to. You may also end up getting an offer from a completely different college to the one you originally applied to. So that happens if you get pulled from the original college that you applied to, and then another college decides to take you out of the pool and give you an offer. But I just want to make it clear that regardless of the Cambridge college you go to, even if it's not the one you had originally had your heart set on, you will almost certainly have a wonderful time there. So please don't worry about this. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to support my channel. I really appreciate it and I get really excited whenever I have somebody new come on board. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section below. That's all from me. Bye guys.